Wednesday evening again, everybody. It's wonderful to have you tuning in to our conversation series about real topics, real people, and real conversations. So we're so glad you're here. My name is Becca Mowry, and I'm here with my husband, Brian. And we are in a two-part series. This is week 2 of a two-part series we are affectionately calling Couples in Quarantine. And we are joined again by Greg and Shelley Diedrich, who were with us last week. So thank you guys so much for being here again.
Thanks for having us.
Last week was really incredible. It was wonderful. If you didn't have a chance to tune in, you can always check it out on our website and YouTube. Tune in on part 1. But we are in part 2 tonight, and we're going to get really, really practical with Greg and Shelley. Now, you may remember they are the founders of Iron Bell Ministry, and they are just phenomenal marriage coaches. And so we're going to glean from them again for another week. So we're really glad to be here together. But last week we chatted about the unique challenges in this quarantine season as couples, and people face all sorts of different challenges based on their walks of life and how we can begin to be intentional in our relationships, investing. And Brian, you had challenged couples to intentionally to write down a plan for how they would invest in their marriage, and that's great. So we hope that you've been able to do that. Tonight we're going to be talking about growing strong in our marriages, and we are going to get really, really practical. So I would encourage you to grab a piece of paper and a pencil, because we're going to be talking about some helpful resources, some exercises you can do as a couple, and just some tools for growing together in your marriage. So we'd love to highlight two particular areas of investing in our relationships, and then really dealing with conflict. So I'm just going to hand it off right now to you guys. When you hear the words investing in a relationship, what are some of the first things that come to mind?
Yeah, well, several years ago, our marriage went through a really difficult season. And as a result of that, we pressed in, we kind of surrendered to the Lord, and then we found a really good marriage counselor. And for over a year, we went diligently and worked through the issues in that season, and put us on a new trajectory. But we didn't stop going to that counselor when we were back on track. And so the first thing I would say to people is seek outside help. Yeah. You know, it's always hardest to see something in your own life or in your own marriage. So it doesn't have to be a counselor, although I highly recommend it. We still talk to our counselor once or twice a year, don't we? He's become kind of almost a family friend, and he knows the dynamics of the kids and everything. And so we're now talking to him about our adult children and how to parent adult children. So, it's a great resource. But you can find an older couple or a couple that's been married longer that you respect and help each other. And so find a coach. It's for everyone. And so that's the first thing I would say. For Beck and I, we've benefited. Both of our parents have strong marriages, but also everywhere we've gone, we've found a couple or two couples to meet with intentionally. I just wanted to affirm you in what you're saying.
Yeah, they're like a season or two ahead of us in life, and they can really help identify some things. You know, we've given them permission to speak into our lives, but also they're just by being around them and doing life together, we've been able to learn a lot from them. So that's been wonderful.
That's absolutely essential, and I would encourage everybody to find a couple that can help you in that piece. The second thing is there's a lot of great resources out there. And, everybody has those resources that, not everybody, but a lot of people have resources that they've been connected to that they like. We have several that we like. I know you have a couple that you recommend.
Well, we did John Gottman resources, and one is called Relationship Cure, and the other was 7 Principles of Making a Happy Marriage. So it's got a long title. I never get it right. But they're both by John Gottman, and they're excellent. And some of the stuff that we're going to be sharing is from those books.
And then we also do some assessments that are very helpful. Many people are familiar with Gary Chapman's Love Languages. Absolutely a critical resource, right? Because otherwise what happens is you're giving love, but it may not be speaking to your partner, right? And maybe we'll have a chance to talk about that. And then, there are several things around, personality profiling. Shelley does the Personality Plus. And
it's the Enneagram. A lot of people are doing that.
And we encourage those. I know, even Walnut Hill offers several things as well.
Yeah. Here at the church, we have marriage mentors, which have been hugely valuable to people who are either preparing for marriage or just want to invest in their marriage. And
Yes.
those are just more, relational kind of connections. And we go through a program called Prepare and Enrich, which is kind of shares a little bit about personalities and different areas, even things like finance and
Right.
decision making and conflict and all this kind of stuff. And it just helps create great atmosphere to talk about those challenging issues. But also we have different, marriage courses and things like that at the church too that people can get involved in.
Yeah. So I think take advantage of that. I mean, that's
Yeah.
invaluable.
Yes.
Everybody needs a coach,
Yeah.
really,
Yes.
and every relationship needs a coach.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
I think that's an important statement, Greg. Like, take advantage of it. Growing up, I grew up in the church, and I think the word like counselor was such a, it had
Loaded.
such a, yeah, and I think people were afraid to say that they had to go see a counselor or their marriage, needed some help. But people
Yes.
were afraid to say it, and so they just swept everything under the rug and fell apart in life. And to really admit, hey, let's get someone, let's get some more tools to make our marriage better. I think it's important.
And I think one of the words that we threw out, got rid of in our marriage was perfect.
Yes.
If you think about, even if you open up a magazine, right? It's the perfect carpet, the perfect paint,
Yeah.
the perfect whatever,
Vacation.
And whether you realize it, you're kind of, there's something you're putting these ideas around yourself that you have to be this certain way.
Yes.
And you know what? It's just that we're all fractured.
Yeah.
And the more we can accept that we're imperfect, and because we're fractured, I'm going to disappoint him, he's going to disappoint me. We're going to do some, and that's where we extend grace. But not that we like it when we disappoint each other, but it's going to happen because we cannot live in a way that we're trying, this
Yes.
perfect way. It doesn't, it's not here.
Yes, it's unrealistic
We're
expectations.
unable to
Yeah.
do that, and Christ is the only one that can love us the way we really need to be.
Yeah.
So stop, I don't look to him anymore, to serve or take care of all my needs, but that he's a fractured man, I'm a fractured woman,
Yeah.
and that's just what it is.
Yeah.
Now, we try to do our best and, get tools and seek the Lord and all that to navigate life's journey. But if you can get rid of that word and just accept our imperfections,
Yeah.
it's also will say, I need help.
Yeah.
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 Yeah, in fact, John Gottman has a saying. He says, one of the greatest gifts you can give your partner or anyone is to know them completely and love them completely.
Absolutely.
So when you can be loved with all your flaws, right? Sounds
Right.
a lot like Christ's love,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
He knows us completely and he loves us completely.
Yes.
So the more we can work towards that, understanding each other and loving us through those flat spots.
Yeah.
And let me add a thought to that. I had a friend I was working with, and I think what keeps a lot of people from saying yes to the journey is they're afraid of what they'll find, like
Right.
maybe in themselves.
Yeah.
And I had this one friend. She kept saying, "Well, I don't know what's down there," And she said that several times. And I said, "Can we hold a minute?" I said, "What do you think is down there?"
Yeah.
And she's like, "Well, I don't know." And I said, "Well, I can tell you what's down there. Who's down there? It's Christ, and He's not scary. And He, and on the bottom of our ugliness is His gentleness, His grace, His kindness, and He knows exactly how to walk alongside us to pull the layers off. And really,
Yes.
they're not. It's not a scary journey. I mean, it's hard because sometimes our pride gets hurt and we don't want to admit things.
Right.
But at the bottom of it is Christ.
Yeah.
And He knows exactly how to navigate the waters.
Yeah. That's really
So
good.
I think, first step is realizing you're not going to have it all, know it all. Coaching is for everybody. Find
Yes.
some good resources, find some good couples,
Yep.
find a good counselor, and
Yep.
invest.
Yeah.
Second thing I would say is there's some great exercises. I want to give a couple of real practical
All
ones.
right.
The first one I mentioned, which is love languages.
Yep.
Many people, are familiar with that. And there are 5 different ones, and you can go on to Love Languages and take the assessment right there. I would encourage people to do that. To
Absolutely.
find out, mine is quality time. That's one of mine. And so that's one of Shelley's too. But then we've gone deeper and we've discovered my quality time is more recreational time. What are we going to do together?
Yeah.
Her quality time is more conversational, gourmet. I call it gourmet conversation.
Yeah.
No hors d'oeuvres. It's like we're gonna have gourmet conversation.
I like that.
Hors d'oeuvres are
And
nice.
that's, yeah, as on the way towards the entree. And so we know that about ourselves. And one of the big mistakes people make is they give love in the way they like to receive it.
Yes.
Right.
And oftentimes then that causes frustration because here you are giving something out, thinking it's working. For many years, I would get Shelley flowers. I'd buy her flowers and send them home because doesn't every woman want flowers? Well, no, gifts is
I
her
do.
last one.
I do. I
Now
like
see,
flowers.
I should have had her send them to you. At least they wouldn't have been wasted. So I'm seeing all these flowers like sitting outside because then I would get the wrong one. She didn't like the smell. So it went outside on the front porch. It was like the dog was enjoying it. And so as we learn this concept, we could start giving the way that our partner needed to receive it. And that's huge because otherwise frustration builds up.
Yeah.
One of the exercises that I just want to describe in this, and maybe Shelley and I can model it a little bit, is I think one of the problems we get into in relationships is we tend to exaggerate and focus on the things that we're not too keen on in our spouse or our partner, right? So it's like you start to focus in on the negatives, right?
Right.
And it's like anything else in life, even during quarantine, right? If we get focused on the negative, we go there.
Yes.
And it
Yep.
controls the way we think, and it controls our mood, and that's our mindset.
Right.
But if we start to focus on what's going well, what do we have? Our Thanksgiving.
Right.
What are we grateful for? What do we have even in the midst of this pandemic, right? What do we have? I'm grateful for this. I think it's the same thing on our spouse.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I would encourage people to just do this. You can answer it one of two ways. It's take turns, on your own, writing down what you are attracted to or what you respect, whatever word works for you about your spouse, and just write down, their honesty, their promptness, their hygiene, their willingness to serve in areas when they're called on, whatever it is, right? And then the other spouse would do that independently, and then sit down and share your list. So it could be any of those, or we like to do it, we call it, I love you because. And this is, I think, the next level that you can go to after kind of
Yes.
the admire, or
Right.
respect. And you could say, I love you because.
Right.
And this concept really helped us as our counselor was helping us kind of get back in touch with why we fell in love with each other. And it's to look beyond the things that people do for you or the way that you serve one another. And what about them?
Right.
Their attributes. So I can say, and oftentimes we default to, Shelley, I love you, which is better than not saying it,
Yeah.
right? But if I look at Shelley and say, Shelley, I love you because I see the way that you have something on your calendar and somebody calls you and says, do you have time? And you say, yes. When I know you don't, I see the kindness that is in you coming out. Shelley, when I'm sitting at the counter and you get up from the table and you walk by me and you rub your hand on my back because you know it's my love language, not yours, then I see the way you're self-sacrificing and trying to meet my need. And I love you because, I see the way you meet our children's needs.
I'm going to get a tissue in here.
And and your desire to really pour into their life. And sometimes you do that without them even knowing it. I'd at least want the credit. I'd
Yeah.
meet the need, but I want the credit. But you see, when I start saying that to
Yeah.
Shelley, that's a very different level.
Yeah.
It's very
of-
intimate.
Yeah, and you feel like you're in on an intimate conversation, and you are. But once you go there, that's a very different way of connecting
yeah.
than if I said, Shelley, I love you, right?
Right.
It says, I know you, and what I know about you, I love.
Right.
Yeah.
That's affirming.
good.
So both of those exercises, the first part is what do you respect or like, but then go push yourself a little bit
Yeah.
and say, I love you because.
Yes.
Right.
And so that's an exercise you can keep doing because new ways will
Yeah.
emerge.
Yeah.
In this season, I love Shelley because, it's harder for her to be in quarantine, I think, with me than it is for me to be with her because I'm much more extroverted, right?
Yeah.
And I want to be communicating, I want to do stuff. She tends to be more introverted. And so I know I'm encroaching on her space more, and yet she shows patience towards me and is willing to, understand me in that way.
Right.
And so I love her in this season because of that.
Right.
So it's always something that can be evolving, right?
Yes.
As seasons
That's really
change.
powerful.
Yeah.
I think, too, like just being able to communicate to each other that way
Yeah.
I mean, it's going to be stretching for a lot of people.
Yes.
I remember
Yeah.
the first time we did this exercise in our marriage. Do you remember it? When we did this, I
better
love you
say
because
yes.
5 years.
Oh, it was a highlight, wasn't
Okay,
it,
I'm just
Brian?
telling you, it was a game changer for me.
Yeah.
It was a turning point
in
in
the
our
marriage course we
It was
did.
in we did the marriage, the Alpha Marriage course, and it was an absolute turning point in our marriage. And when Brian started listing the things that he loved, he said, "I love you because," and he listed 5 different things. By the third one, I was weeping.
Yeah.
But the other thing that was so, because you don't talk like that normally to
Yeah.
each other
Right.
unless you make it an intentional habit.
Right.
But things that I didn't like about myself or that I didn't think he loved about me
Yeah.
were the things that were on that list.
Right.
Yeah.
Like I remember one of the things you said is, "I love how fiery you get about things," and I
Right.
thought you hated that about me because we're so
Right.
opposite in that area. You know, I
Wow.
get all like fiery
Yeah.
and passionate
yeah.
about things. I know it's hard to believe, but
Yeah. The amount of letters that Becca still has to write is
I know
amazing right now.
about being upset about.
But
things. I
I'm
never
going to
are.
write a letter.
But
The unwritten letters.
Oh, yeah.
That's
It
the
was
next
so
sermon series.
It was such a it was a game changer in our marriage.
yeah.
It was such a game changer to hear you speak to me that way, and then to think things that I was embarrassed about or didn't like about myself or thought you didn't like about me. They were qualities that you loved in me, and it was a whole
Yeah, it's
turning
huge,
point. I
yeah.
remember
Yeah.
that was a turning point in
And
our
I think,
marriage.
when the biggest message was we're giving each other is, I see you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm noticing you.
Yeah.
And these are things that I love. But everybody wants to be seen, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Does
Yes.
anybody notice me? Does anybody see me
Right.
over here? And we're very strategic about particular words. Someone's noticing.
Yeah.
And we
Right.
want our spouses, obviously,
Yeah.
to be
Yeah.
the number one that's doing that.
Yeah.
I think the other thing is, the enemy hates intimacy between a man and a woman, between us and God.
Yeah.
Right? So anything he can do to break that intimacy. And I think once you start to communicate like that, you break that awkwardness down, right? The first
Yeah.
time is the hardest.
Yes.
But then the next time,
Yeah.
it becomes easier. And then you can go there
Right.
without awkwardness or without feeling like, oh, I don't think I can do this. And so I think it breaks down that separation that the enemy tries to build up and creates more oneness.
Yeah.
And so I think it's almost like spiritual warfare in a
Yes.
sense.
Right.
So it
Yeah.
not only brings you together, but I think it fights against what the enemy's trying to do, which is take you apart.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the other exercise
Yeah.
is this. It's called the Turning Towards exercise. This is one we got from John Gottman. And in it, it's a very helpful way of just practically finding things that you can both do together that you love to do, okay? Now, there are some things that you want to do by yourself and apart from your spouse, and you want to give space for that. But there are certain things that you want to do together that bond you together. And they
Yeah.
could be simple things. It could be you want to wash the dishes together, you
Right.
know? Whereas one person gets stuck doing it, maybe the other one wants them there, help.
Right.
Or it could be, hey, I want to read aloud a book together. Or it could be, hey, I want to go for a walk together.
Right,
You know?
right.
Or it could be, what I'd like to do is plan a vacation together. And what I would encourage people to do is individually just write down 1, 2, or 3 things that you would like to do with your spouse.
Yeah.
And have your spouse do that separately. And then come together and agree to take at least one off of each of your list and do
Oh,
it
that's
together.
great.
Yeah.
And hopefully 2.
Right.
And, if we were to do this, when we did this, we talk about some of the things that
Well,
we
every
do
year
together.
in Louisville, there's this amazing Christmas choir that does
Cantata,
a
yeah.
cantata. It's wonderful. And I love to go. I love big choirs. And so Greg would go with me. Now, that's not what he would enjoy.
Right.
But
I'm
he-
more of a classic rock guy.
Yeah.
Sorry about that.
Yeah, so he would go because he knew I loved it.
Yeah.
And I wanted him to experience it with me, and he would go with a good attitude, not begrudging.
Right.
And so I look forward to that. And I know he's not, looking forward that much, but we're looking forward to being together. And so that's something that we do every year. He does that for me.
And
Yeah.
one of the things I've learned, I used to tolerate it. I'd look at how many songs and then multiply
Yeah.
it by 4 or 5 minutes, and I'd be like, and then I realized, I started looking at her, and
Yeah.
I saw her face come to life during
Yeah.
these songs, and then I just started going to this
Yes.
cantata to watch her
Yeah.
and
Right.
really see her joy. And I got joy through experiencing her joy more than I did listening to the music.
Right.
But it just connects us
Yeah.
when you do that.
Yeah.
One of the things that, small ways that, there are certain sporting events I like to watch. I'm not a big sports nut where I watch everything, But you always watch college basketball in Kentucky. It's a requirement, otherwise you
Oh,
get
you pay.
arrested.
Right.
So when it gets to be the time where, the tournament, and there's always somebody from Kentucky, either Louisville or Kentucky, going deep into it, I like her to watch those games with me.
Yeah.
Because she'll get into it. She'll want to know the story of the person, the background,
Right.
where they're from, and that's great. And she'll look it up, and she'll tell me. I was like, oh, I didn't know he was from, Romania or something, right? And but we can do that together, and that's something that we have fun together doing. We don't do it a lot, but when we do it, it's meaningful to me because I know
Yeah.
she's in there and she's engaged with it. So.
Yeah.
I would just encourage people to go ahead and pick those one or two things
That's
and then
great.
just go ahead and do those. Make them simple. Doesn't have to
Yeah.
be complicated. When you check those off, pick one or two more.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
We encourage you to do that, maybe even this week, to
Yeah.
to go through these exercises, and this is what it looks like to invest.
Yeah.
It's what it looks like to deepen our relationship with one another. Can we talk about the maybe the part of the conversation people have been waiting for?
Yeah.
Okay, maybe not. Maybe everybody watching this, never has had conflict in their relationship ever before. But
Yeah.
there are potholes that
Yeah.
any marriage can hit, any relationship can hit. You could probably apply some of these principles we're going to talk to even in friendships.
Yes, absolutely.
And so you might be single and watching this tonight, and you can apply these principles and things
Yeah.
we're going to talk about now. But can you talk to us a little
Yeah.
bit about, can you kind of guide this conversation
Yeah.
on some of the potholes and,
Yeah.
and how to deal with them?
Absolutely. One of the things that we deal a lot with in marriage coaching is conflict because, you either have two extremes. People have a lot of conflict and don't know how to resolve it, or they avoid it altogether.
Yeah.
Right.
And there are a lot of unresolved issues that come back at some point. And so neither one of those is good.
No.
And in fact, the amount of conflict in a marriage, scientifically, is not related to the health of the marriage. What is related is to the ability to resolve and
Right.
deal with that conflict in
Yep.
a way where the relationship and each of the person's, identity, if you will, stays intact.
Yeah.
So one of the first things that we teach people is this idea of, hey, conflict can be your friend, believe it or not.
Right.
To which point they start looking for another marriage
Yes.
coach, right?
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
they're
We're
like,
out.
who is this guy? What's he talking about?
And let me just add, we were horrible at conflict.
Yeah.
We never got to the other side of it.
Yeah.
And we didn't have a lot of
Yeah,
it.
and we didn't, but it was.
Right.
So what we'll share with you, we have learned.
Yeah.
And we have practiced.
Yeah.
And it works.
I think it's
good.
good to hear. A lot of people are not good at dealing with it. It's
Most
not
people
a
are not.
natural
Right.
No.
thing that people know how to deal with. And so
Right.
get some of these tools. It's
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, conflict can be your friend because in it there are some needs and desires, some unspoken things that need to come out in a relationship. If you're really going to have intimacy, right, and you're
Right.
going to have the ability to talk freely, then you're going to have things that create potential conflict.
Yep.
That's okay.
Yeah.
Now, how you handle it is critical, right?
Yeah.
And so the first thing, we could talk a lot about conflict, but the thing I want to talk about in this session is that there are some things that happen in conflict that are toxic to your relationship. And so these are the things I want to highlight, that if you have these in any great degree, you need to eliminate them or mitigate them to a great extent. Because what I'm going to talk about here is not about the conflict, it's really about either one of you or both of you trying to put the other person down to the
Right.
point where you're raised up. So
Right.
you're right, you're better, it's about that. And that is very toxic to a relationship. So let's dive into those. Gottman calls them the four horsemen of the apocalypse, appropriately.
apocalypse.
So,
Oh my
yes,
goodness, okay.
Yeah.
Serious.
And so here's the first thing. So usually the initiating party comes up and says, hey, I want to talk about something, right? Well, the starting point is the most important point of any conflict discussion. And so the first horseman of the apocalypse is what he calls a harsh startup, right? Who would you say between us has a harsh startup?
Probably me.
Okay. I
Because I'm
agree with
quite
that.
passionate, yeah.
That was a setup.
Well, wait till we get to the second one.
Oh, yeah, revenge is coming. But, as we learn this, Shelley's gotten much better about it. And
Yeah.
what's a harsh
No, you
startup look
always
like?
think you're right about that.
I do.
I mean,
Yes.
that really, I've been meaning to talk to you about that. It's really irritating. I thought you were working on that.
Yeah, so there's a harsh startup.
Okay.
All right, so
I thought we had just entered a
I
conflict.
know, I was like, what's happening? Cut the
you
tape,
asked
cut
for
the
it.
tape.
You got it. So what would you say is a better way to do it?
Yeah, I've been feeling, I feel like when you raise your voice, I have something I'd like to tell you that's been bothering me, and when I want to bring it to you, but I would really need you to maybe not be so defensive this time.
Okay,
So what I was thinking was the other day,
boom. Okay, so it's about you, I versus you, and it's in a
Yeah.
different tone.
Right.
And so what happens, that harsh startup had a lot of energy behind it, right?
Right.
And so sometimes what that causes, most of the time what that causes, unless you're really mature in your ability to work with this, is a fight or flight response.
Right.
Right? And so when that's coming at me, I either duck, or the second horseman of the apocalypse, which is my specialty.
Okay.
It's called defensiveness. Okay?
Yeah.
This is counterpunching. So about halfway through the harsh startup,
Yeah.
I've launched a left hook,
Yes.
figuratively speaking,
Yes.
that says, well, you
Yes.
always, or you're this, and I turn it on her.
The curse of the comeback.
Yes, exactly.
Right.
And so that is basically responding with equal or more energy and turning it right back on the other person. So I'm escalating it, right? Instead of taking it down, I've just escalated it. And that's called defensiveness.
Right.
And so I say I'm a good counterpuncher. Now, oftentimes, if we get into a conflict, we will immediately call something out. Like, I'll say, boy, that was a little harsh on the startup. She'll go, okay, let me go back. And we'll do a do-over.
Right.
You know, Mulligan, we coach each other now, and because we know this, because she doesn't want me to, like, be escalated, she wants to resolve something. That's her
Right.
goal, right?
Right.
And then the second thing is, sometimes I'll still respond defensively, so she goes, wow, that was a good left hook. And I'll go, yeah, you're right, that was pretty good.
Right.
Well,
sometimes
and-
I'll even call himself on it,
yeah,
Right.
you know, just say,
Right.
yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's true. And then we can almost laugh about it,
Right.
right? Almost. We could, we
Right.
kind of know. It's like, oh yeah, you're right.
And those relationships where, you know, where there's the defensiveness and the blame, like for me, it's put back on me, and then your head kind of spins. It's like, how did I become the bad guy?
Yes.
How did I?
Right.
It just spins out. You don't get
Yeah.
anywhere.
Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
trying to bring up something that's important. You're blaming me. You know, it becomes, and so that gets escalated. So that's the second horseman of the apocalypse.
Okay.
So first one is a harsh start. Second one is defensiveness. The third one is what he calls contempt.
Okay.
And that is, we had a daughter who was really good at this. So never any verbal, like, defensiveness, but just the, oh, yeah.
Yeah,
It's like, uh-huh,
Yeah.
you're all right.
Yeah.
Right? And it's like communicating
Yep.
a very
love
strong
body
message, with body language that says, what do you know?
Yes. Yep.
It's basically putting the other person down.
Right.
And it's doing so in a passive-aggressive way.
Yes.
Right? So I'm not going to hit you with a counterpunch, but boy, I've got a way to
Dismiss.
just put you in your
Dismiss.
place.
Yeah, you're just
Dismissive.
dismissive.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Dismissive.
Is that like even walking out altogether?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just using your body to communicate
Yeah.
any.
You're
kind
not
of
worth the
message. Yeah.
reply.
Right.
Yeah.
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 Yeah, that's exactly right. And so you can see how in those first two responses, defensiveness and contempt, it's all about putting you in your place.
Yeah.
That's what
About
I'm
being
trying
right.
to do.
Yeah.
Being
Yeah.
right. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a big problem. Wanting to
Yeah.
be right. You
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
Wanting our way.
Yeah.
Human nature.
Yeah, and wanting to be right.
Yeah.
So that's the third horseman. And then the final one is called stonewalling.
And I was good at this, so I will tell you about this.
He kind of turned
Yes.
to you.
Oh, no, it's
quickly.
like,
Right
see,
on
okay,
cue.
yeah, right on
Stonewalling.
cue, right on cue, yeah, I know.
Who might talk about
I
stonewalling?
know. It's the point in the argument or whatever is the conflict where you basically shut it down.
Right.
I would go when we were married, very, very young, early in our relationship, I would shut the door and give Greg the silent treatment.
Right.
And he'd be on the other side of the door, Shelly, can you come out and talk? And I'm like, are you kidding me?
Yeah.
You know, and for hours I'd be in there. My mother used to do that, and I did not like that about my mother. Now, I remember when I did that very early in my marriage, the Holy Spirit said, okay, you've got a choice here.
Yeah.
And I call it the three-legged stool. One, I've got to realize that I'm doing it.
Yeah.
Number two, I repented. I'm like, I don't want to bring that
Yeah.
into my marriage. And the third, the Lord's like, what are you going to do about it?
Yeah.
You're going to open the door and go out and try to sit down and have a civil conversation?
Yeah.
Because I didn't know how to do that. I never saw that. And I felt like if I was doing that, I was giving into him. But I would, you shut him out, you stonewall him, you literally, you've given the message that this conversation is over.
Yeah.
And
Right.
Yeah.
so I would do that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you
Not anymore.
And you don't do that anymore. She's really, and we've been able to grow in this even later in our marriage. We'll be married 40 years this summer.
So
and,
awesome.
Yeah, praise God. And we're still growing in it.
Yeah.
We're still learning about it. We're still getting better at these things.
Yeah, but see, the three-legged stool, the third is the hardest because it requires you to do something.
Yes.
Right.
And that's where people don't want to do it.
Yeah, they always want to point the finger. That's
Yeah.
easier.
They want
Yeah.
to stay right. They don't, their pride, whatever it is, they're like, are you kidding me? I
Yeah.
am not doing that.
Yeah.
And then you'll never get anywhere.
Yeah.
In fact, a lot of the people that we coach, silently their agenda is they come in hoping that we'll
Yes.
figure out how to fix their spouse.
Yes.
course.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly. And then the first thing we say is, you have to assume that whether you're 49 or 51% of the problem, you're the only person that you can fix.
Yeah.
And you have to be willing to do whatever it takes to do that.
Yes.
And so that humility and that willingness to be teachable
Yeah.
and say, you know what? And even later in our marriage, we were willing to learn, and we said, we want a thriving marriage, so what's it take?
Yeah.
It takes not being defensive, or it takes
Yeah.
not stonewalling. So
Yeah.
I think the last point that I'll mention on this is then stonewalling, she mentioned, is kind of just saying, putting a shell up and saying, I'm done, literally. But there is a point where when you're having an argument sometimes where people will get to a point where Gottman calls it flooding. And it's basically that those brain chemicals have flooded your brain, and you're no longer capable of having a rational conversation. So
Yep.
mostly what you say is going to be destructive.
Right.
Right?
Right.
And so at that point, Gottman says, just say, time out, I'm flooded, and give yourself at least 45 minutes. Now, that doesn't give you the ability to forget it altogether. You come back.
Yes.
45 minutes later, the next morning, you
Yep.
schedule a time. But if you try to push through when you're flooded from that
Yes.
perspective, then you're going to cause more damage, collateral damage in that relationship. So these are toxins that we found. If we can just give people, I remember when I found out I was defensive. You'd think I'd know
You were like,
that,
"No, I'm
but
not."
I was like, no, I'm not, but you are. But, I remember I said to the counselor, our counselor, I said, what should I do about it? He says, stop it.
Yeah.
And I was
Yeah.
like, and he said, these things are so important.
Yeah.
You have to be so intentional and so willful that you have to say, I'm not going to do that.
Yeah.
Right? And you're going to slip, but it's like, I'm on a new path. I'm going to get rid of these because I know these destroy our relationship.
Yeah.
And everything we're doing to build it up gets destroyed in that instant.
Yeah, that's really good. Thank you guys so much. We're running out of time. We've got so much. We're gonna have you back again. We'll do this more. But I want to leave everybody with two things, and one would be to take some time together and draw out or ask each other this question: how are we going to invest in our relationship? And the second one would be, and Beck and I often use this language with couples, is how are we going to fight together?
Yeah.
And I think a lot of times the problem, you can't really learn how to fight in the fight.
Yes.
It's not a great
No.
way to learn.
Right.
It'd be like, throwing you out in a sports game or something like, here, you're playing. Well, I don't know how to play, right? You have to learn how to do it
Right.
first. So reflect on the things Greg and Shelley shared with us today and talk about how do you deal with conflict? What arises conflict, and how can you be good fighters together?
Yeah.
And so, friends, we hope that this has been helpful. We'll have them back again. There's so much here that we could talk about, but we hope that you go out of this session ready to talk to one another about how to invest in your relationship, but also how to be good fighters together. And so we hope that this has been helpful for you to strengthen you in your relationships. God bless you, and we'll see you soon.